This is the Silver and Black Today podcast, your source for Raiders news and information. Now, here's your hosts, swaggering boisterously.
Oh yes, welcome back, Raider Nation. It is a Monday, just before 7:15 p.m. on the West Coast, Pacific time zone, as the end of summer is coming fast. Good evening. This is Scott Branson from silverandblacktoday.com, and of course, Silver and Black Today on CBS Sports Radio, 1140 a.m. in Las Vegas. If you haven't listened to our radio show, you can do that every Sunday from 8 to 10 a.m. so we can be your pregame show when the Raiders are at our home. When they're on the road on the East Coast, we're exactly your pregame show, and we're the only all Raiders show in Las Vegas. That's right, so make sure you tune in. If you want to listen outside Las Vegas, as we know we have a lot of listeners, a lot of folks who read, of course, silverandblacktoday.com, our website, you can download the radio.com app, and you will be able to listen to the show no matter where you're at, which is a great app, too. You can listen to the sports radio from all over the country as well on that app. So it's worth your time to download. You can do it on iOS. So if you have an iPhone or if you have an Android phone, you can do that as well and listen to it in a browser as well. So you have that, and we always post that show about a couple hours after it's over on Sundays. We post that up on our website as well. Mondays, of course, are our podcast with our good friend, our NFL senior writer and columnist, Hayden Nadolny. He's our man down under. Hayden, he joins us now. How you doing, man, down in Australia?
I'm doing great. It's a little bit cold down here, but otherwise we're okay.
Yes, so let's update everybody that it is winter in Australia, of course. And so when you say it's cold down there, I know, and I can't wait for that, dude. We've had, of course, it's Las Vegas. It's a desert, so we get temperatures, hot temperatures. I love the desert. At the same time, about this time in August, Hayden, I want to wear a sweater. Like I want some 50, 60-degree weather as we've had, I think, 42 days in a row of over 103 or so. So I'm looking forward to that.
No, definitely. No, I'm going on a vacation at the end of the week up to far north Queensland, and it's going to be about 90 degrees every day. It's going to be absolutely perfect. Can't wait.
Yeah, Australia has such a diverse amount of weather. I mean, for where it's at, I mean, you can encounter a lot of different things, and I know it's such a beautiful place, and you can kind of go from desert to beautiful coast in no time. So that's great. Well, we want to talk Raiders football with you, of course, and here we are in the middle, quote unquote, of the preseason. We've had game 2, of course. We talked about it on our radio show yesterday. Not a fun game, very vanilla, and it is what it is. It is preseason. It was against the Rams, of course, who they are playing in week number 1, so you didn't want to give away too much. But in your column, again, Hayden's column, any given Monday, you can read, guess which day of the week? Every Monday. And in the column, Hayden, we use this podcast to walk through some, not all, of the contents of your column because we want people to go read it. But we like to focus in on a couple things. And you write about the game that was and the game against the Rams. We learned some things. And so we want to start out first talking about, I think, something that everybody's been talking about since the game. And that, of course, is the play of the backup quarterbacks, E.J. Manuel, Connor Cook. You, of course, wrote a great piece about Connor Cook because he looks so good against the Lions, Hayden, and then he comes out against the Rams not so good.
No, he didn't. Last week against, in the first week of the preseason, he just looked solid. He looked really poised, composed. And then this week, he just looked a shell of himself. And I think that's also in part because the offensive line was terrible, and that's putting it lightly, in pass protection. And that wasn't just for Connor Cook. E.J. Manuel was getting pressured left, right, and center as well. And there were a few times when Manuel could have taken a sack, but he was able to get the ball away. Not really sure if that's the best idea in terms of ball security that you want from a backup quarterback, but on the whole, both quarterbacks were subpar, and that they need to really step it up if they're going to have some stability there if Derek Carr goes down with injury.
Yeah, and if you look at both quarterbacks, Hayden, both turned over the ball, right? I think Connor Cooks, you could argue, was not a turnover, but of course there was not going to be a challenge. It was preseason. John Gruden wanted to get out of that game as fast as he possibly could. E.J. Manuel's turnover, again, though, we saw almost a repeat of what happened with Detroit. Now, Manuel did throw a touchdown pass to Griff Whalen, really kind of a nice catch by Whalen in the end zone against the Rams. But if you look at these two guys, now, I don't think it's a concern if they bounce back this week, if you're going to see Derek Carr a little bit more, obviously, against the Packers. But if they both bounce back this week and look serviceable, then you're not as concerned. If they don't, if they both come out, Hayden, and they look like they did against the Rams, then the Raiders have some serious issues.
Oh, absolutely. One thing that you need to realize, though, is that the play calling was so vanilla that you're almost having to rely on talent to get you by, especially last week in that preseason game, because you can't, given the circumstances with the Rams being the week one opponent, it means that you can't schematically get receivers open, or you can't show anything that's going to make life easier for the quarterback. So there are going to be a number of different ways that Gruden's going to be able to dial up plays for both Connor Cook and E.J. Manuel that are going to lead to easy completions. It's going to get the team in rhythm. But we certainly do need to see an improvement. But I certainly think that with the play calling, it's going to make it a lot easier on the quarterbacks.
And there's the other thing is, if they don't perform up to snuff, then and the Raiders will have to figure something out and go with the best option, whether it's Manuel or Cook. At the same time, there's been some conversation around who might be available if they want to go out and get another backup. Really, there's not much out there. I mean, a lot of talk about Teddy Bridgewater. I don't see that happening. I also know that the Jacksonville Jaguars are a team that would like to perhaps bring him in as well if he becomes available that way. So I don't think that that's going to be the answer. There's not like a magic bullet out there with some great backup quarterback sitting there. So hopefully, and they really need to get it ironed out, so we'll see what happens. Now, the other story of the game, Hayden, and you touch on this in your column, of course, is what everyone talks about when you talk about the Raiders in this preseason. And that, of course, is the play of the undrafted free agent out of Texas, Chris Warren III. And if you look at what he did, again, over 100 yards and a touchdown for the Raiders against the Rams. What do you think about Warren and where he's at this point in the preseason?
He's at the point now where there's enough film on him such that if he does get cut, he's not going to pass waivers to get to the practice squad. So the Raiders are going to have to make a decision. They're either going to have to keep him on the 53-man roster, or they're going to have to cut him and virtually guarantee that he's going to be gone, because there's no way that he's getting through to the practice squad. That's going to mean that you're likely looking at cutting one of Jalen Richard or DeAndre Washington. I believe at this stage it would most likely be Washington. Of course, there are a few weeks left to the season. Anything can happen. At this stage, I would say that Warren's going to make the 53-man roster. I think there's something there that Gruden likes. There's a lot in terms of scope and potential regarding the player. And once he gets his pad level down, and what he saw it even just last week, he's starting to show that he's getting his pads a bit more down in terms of it's happening more consistently now.
Yeah,
he needs to learn. He needs to learn not to go outside. He bounces outside too much and tries to be a bit of a finesse back at times. But when he really does lower his shoulder, the Raiders would have a good back on their hands there.
Yeah, and his speed is not such that he can improvise, like you said. And speaking of lowering those pads and being more physical, today at the press conference post practice, they asked John Gruden about that and about Warren being more of a physical back, because he himself has said he's not been that type of back, and that he's been asked to do it here. And here's what Coach Gruden had to say about him.
Yeah, I think he's running behind his pads better. I think he really picked that up in the scrimmages against the Lions. He made some great runs in those two practices. I'm not really as worried about him as a ball carrier as I am what kind of back is he without the ball. Picking up blitzes, handling the audibles. He's still got to grow a lot as a running back, but as a runner, he's learning how to run behind his pads and be physical.
Now, that he touched on something really important, Hayden, there, and I am one that, listen, you can't take anything away from what he's done in the preseason. Yes, he's playing against second-tier, third-tier offenses, but he's also playing, like you said, behind not his number one offensive line either, and he's still making things happen. But what Coach Gruden talked about there, specifically away from the ball, these are things that a running back in the NFL, if they're going to make the roster and play, okay, they have to be able to do that. And to me, I'm just not convinced yet because of those little intangible things. I think fans, particularly in Raider Nation, have gotten really excited about him because of the numbers he's put up, right? But at the same time, you have to look at those other things. You have to look at how else he plays around the ball. The other thing that really concerns me, Hayden, that I want to get your reaction to is, if you look at the film, I watched a lot of film of him today in preparation for tonight, and he does not protect the ball well either.
No, that's certainly something that he's going to need to be a bit more careful on going forward. And I think at the same time, there's been such a small sample size with him, so he certainly needs to get more carries. And I hope that the Raiders do give him a lot of carries in the next game against Green Bay. And I'd like to see him just get a little bit of work with the ones, just to see how he goes there. At the same time, he needs to get the pass protection down. If he can get the pass protection down, the Raiders have enough other types of players in the backfield that they'll have a good mix there, and they'll be able to cut one of Richard or Washington.
Right, and you're looking at, Warren, if you look at the data and using Pro Football Focus, the data package here, you look at where he's had 31 attempts. John Kelly from the Rams also has 31. Nick Chubb, of course, on Cleveland, the rookie, with 28. So he's 25, excuse me. He's run the ball a lot. 196 yards, so he's approaching 200 yards. He leads the league in the preseason in that. If you look at yards per average, though, he's tied for fourth behind guys like Robert Martin, Marcus Murphy, Kenyon Drake, Carlos Hyde. So not exactly superstars there, again, because of the fact that a lot of first-teamers aren't playing. At the same time, that's the only point of caution that I'm giving folks out there in Raider Nation is the reason I'm not convinced yet is for all the things that you said. Also, though, I mean, if you look at the history of the NFL and if you look at the preseason, we've seen plenty of guys who've lit it up in the preseason, even made the roster, and then really weren't able to do it when it came to playing against first-tier defenses. Now, I believe we will see, like you said, if he gets carries, which I think he will and he deserves based on what he's done against the Packers, especially that first defense, which should play most of the first half, according to folks in Green Bay, then we'll see where he's at.
No, exactly. We just need to see where he's at with the ones, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see. And again, I'm rooting for the kid. It's not that I'm rooting against him. I just think as an NFL player, especially making the roster, and I agree with you. I think he makes the roster. At the same time, if he can't improve in those areas over the next few weeks, then you're right. The Raiders will have a tough decision. Now, we look at the guys in front of him. You talked about how poor the offensive line play was. We even saw Brandon Parker at left tackle, which was mind-blowing to me. But, that's John Gruden. He throws guys in there sometimes just to see how it goes. But Donald Penn, of course, the talk of the week last week was him working at right tackle. Do you see Donald Penn being at right tackle permanently for this team going into the season?
I'll be surprised if it's not. I'll tell you that much. It certainly seems that's the way they're going to go. They want to get the 5 best guys on the field, and the 2 best tackles are Miller and Penn, and they don't really want to move Miller, switching him side to side all the time, because that's going to hinder and stun his development. Whereas if they can just move Donald to the right side, see how that goes. If that sticks, they've got themselves a pretty good line on their hands, and that right tackle position finally for the first time in God knows how many years, it's going to be a little bit more stable than we've seen. Yeah, and
that's the thing too, is Penn knows the left side so well that if anything happens or if it's not working out, they can always shift him back. And then you can try to fill in right with who you got left. And Brandon Parker, a lot of people were hard on him this week. For me, I thought, he did not play well. There's no question. At the same time, he's also been injured and hasn't practiced a ton, so we'll see how he develops. It should be interesting to see, but we'll see what happens on that right side. It certainly seems like that's the direction Gruden's going, and I don't think it's necessarily a terrible thing. Now, we look at another area that I wanted to mention and talk to you about, and that is this receiving core. If you look at how they've played again, without the first teamers, without Cooper, without Jordy Nelson out there as well. If you look at Griff Whalen and Switzer, very much, I think, in that Bill Belichick mode of just a receiver who can get out, get the ball, good hands. They're not going to break any big, long plays usually. And we saw that with Whalen in the end zone. He got open with a nice ball from E.J. Manuel low in the zone there to get the touchdown. And then you have Seth Roberts, who, of course, hasn't been on the field. He's been injured for about 10 days. What do you see there? Who's going to be the odd man out when it comes time for cuts?
Okay, so the locks at the moment would have to be Amari Cooper, you've got Jordy Nelson, Martavis Bryant. Those are the three that are unquestionably they're going to make the team. Switzer, I will be absolutely stunned if he doesn't make the team. He's going to get time on punt returns. He's also going to get time on kick returns. They like him in the slot. I would go as far to say he's like as much of a lock as you can get with the other three as well. Then you've got another potentially two spots. I think they're going to keep 6 wide receivers. Based on everything that, if you look at past history, it tends to be they keep 6. So really you've got Marcel Aitman, Seth Roberts, Johnny Horton, Griff Whalen, and Dwayne Harris. Those are the last 5 guys, more or less, that you're looking at keeping for the last 2 spots. I think Aitman's going to get on the roster because I think they're going to like some of the things that they can do with him in the red zone. Seth Roberts, they're going to be shopping around. They've already tried to trade him back in the draft. There weren't any bites at that time, largely because of his contract. Now, given that the Raiders have already paid some of that contract now, they'll be able to likely get something in return. And by something, I mean maybe a conditional pick 2 years down the track, but it will be something. It's better than nothing at this point. And I don't really think Roberts is going to add anything to the team. And we just know that given Roberts, his hands, they're not that great. Gruden's going to go all Chucky on him, so we know it's not going to work there. Then we've got Johnny Holton. Johnny Holton's a speed guy. He hasn't really shown anything else apart from the fact that he's got speed. Still got very suspect hands. I don't trust him. I expect him to be cut, given that he's also a special teams guy who is no better than Ryan Switzer in that area. So I would say for my estimation, Johnny Holton's gone. Then you've got Whalen and Harris. They like Harris because of his special teams role. He can do that. They also like Whalen because he can do a few things on special teams as well. It's going to come down to a mesh. I think at this stage, probably either, I'm leaning towards Whalen, but it really could be Harris as well. But then again, what do I know? It could be Johnny Holton. So I'm sitting on the fence with that one at the moment. There's still a lot to play out. There's still 2 games of preseason to go. So let's wait and see. I think we're going to know a lot based on who plays in that 4th preseason game, because if you're playing in that game, especially in the second half, you're not going to be there in a few days' time. So that's going to give us a much better picture. And
I think Whalen, one of the reasons I would bet on him is he's in that mold that Gruden likes, which he's just a hardworking guy. Yes, he doesn't have a breakaway speed, but he has sure hands. And I know Raider fans don't like the Raiders being compared to the Patriots, but I think Gruden is going down that line, which is, if you look at that, you just need guys who can catch the ball. You got your speed guys. You got your big 3, right? Especially Bryant and Cooper with the speed, and Jordy Nelson, who's got, I think, more speed than people think. In fact, Derek Carr mentioned that today in the press conference after practice. But to me, I just think that he's got those Gruden-like intangibles that he likes. But you're right. We'll see how it goes. Now, we did get a question. We'll back up just a little bit on the offensive line. We got a question from our listener, Corey, for you, Hayden, that says, how much did the Giacomini injury have to do with Penn moving over, though? Think that had a lot to do with Penn getting to the right side.
I don't think it's had much to do with it at all. They said a while ago to Donald Penn, going as far back as the draft, that they had a plan for him. And I think what's happened is that initially they wanted him to be the starting left tackle, and they were going to give Colton Miller time to almost get his feet wet in the NFL. But then really what's happened is that Miller has surprised a lot of people with the way that he's progressed over the preseason. and it's really essentially made that he's taken that left tackle position, and really he's now one of the top 5 guys on that line. So they needed to figure out something, and everyone knows that Donald Penn is a better player than Giacomini. It's really that simple. So get Penn over to the other side of the line where they can get the top 5 guys on.
Well, and I think one of the shifting gears a little bit back to the defense, one of the, I think, unsung heroes, although people are starting to take notice because they're playing so well, is Derek Ansley, who coaches the defensive backs. Now, you wrote in your column about Antonio Hamilton and his play in the secondary, and of course, we've seen rookie Nick Nelson, I think, who's solidified his roster spot already. Even though he had a couple mistakes, they were good mistakes. He was still in coverage. He didn't find the ball on the one long completion against him. But if you look at this group, Hayden, it's hard to find another group on this team that has progressed, with the exception of maybe the defensive line, this fast, this quick, and really getting all that they can out of the talent that they have.
Well, just look at Antonio Hamilton. He'd be like Exhibit A on how much you can improve over an off-season. He looked an absolute mess last year. He was blowing coverages whenever he got onto the field, and he wasn't on the field much. And he was still blowing coverages almost every snap. And then this year, he actually, so far in the preseason, he looks really composed, and he's got a little bit of a swag to him. I mean, okay, that 15-yard penalty for the body slam, that was a little bit unnecessary. But there's something to work with there. There's talent there. You can see it. It's just a case of the players seem to have so much more confidence this year, and they're reacting, and they're not panicking when the ball's in the air.
Yeah, and I like they're always around the ball. That's the thing. You know, to me, last year you saw so many blown coverages. You saw guys 10 yards away from the ball often. It wasn't like it was a couple games. It was almost every single game where you saw that. So to see them, even though, again, it's preseason, just to see how they're playing, the aggressiveness that you get from Paul Gunther's scheme, and then, of course, with Derek Ansley back there really coaching these guys up, to me, that is one of the big stories so far of camp then into the preseason. So it'll be exciting to see what happens. What about Nick Nelson? You wrote about him as well. He needs to get better, as you say, on the deep routes. But I like where he's at. Doesn't mean he's going to play the majority of snaps in his position all the time. But I do think he's a kid that they really did draft well.
Yeah, I think there's something to work with there. He's got a lot of talent, that's for sure. And I mean, he had one deep route where it didn't look as bad on replay, I don't think, as what some made it out to be. So he did turn the right way when trying to track the ball, and it just was a case of he couldn't get his hand in there to break up the pass. But he saw the ball coming in, and he just wasn't able to make a play on it. I certainly think long-term the Raiders have something there. I'm not quite sure if he's going to contribute much this year, but they've got a logjam at corner now, and it seems like they haven't had a bit of depth there in a while. So any depth, especially at this point, and I mean, Darryl Worley could be getting a suspension early on. So there's the possibility that a guy like Antonio Hamilton or the rookie Nick Nelson, they're going to have to step up early in the season and contribute.
Certainly, and I think that's the name of the game with John Gruden too. Is you got to be able to step in when they need you and perform to the best of your ability. So we'll see how the rookie develops over time. Now, we also saw Garyon Conley on the field again, I should say, for the first time in a long time, and it was good to see him out there. What did you think overall of his performance? Did he look ready to go, almost at full game speed for the regular season?
Yeah, he looks ready to go. He was in his in the receiver's hip pocket the whole time. They only threw it his way one time, and there was no chance of it being a completion. It was closer to being an interception than anything else. He's ready to go. I'm so excited to see Conley this year, because really, if you go back to the time that Conley was drafted, at that time, both he and his Ohio State teammate was Marshawn Lattimore, and they were considered the 1A and 1B of corners. Well, we all know what Marshawn Lattimore did last year. He is going to be an absolute stud, a top 5 corner in this league, and the coaches down at Ohio State actually thought that Conley was the better player. So if that's not an endorsement I don't know what is. And I think the Raiders are going to have a steal going forward with Conley, provided that he stays healthy.
Yep, that's everybody's kind of, I think, holding their collective breath to get him to the regular season, and we'll see how much action he gets. He might be a guy that they play in spots just to make sure they get him to that regular season healthy. But one of the other things you wrote about and want to revisit a little bit. Oh, let me mention to everybody out there, you're listening to the Silver and Black Today podcast. Check out the website, silverandblacktoday.com, where you can read Hayden's new column from today, Any Given Monday, where he talks about the subjects we're talking about tonight on the podcast. The podcast, of course, brought to you by the Laborers Local 872 here in town, the men and women building the Raiders' new stadium in Las Vegas. Also, Michael A. Troiano, attorney at law. If you have a criminal defense needs, Michael Troiano is the guy to call. Check out VegasLaw.com, as well. So we thank them for their sponsorship of this podcast and the website and the radio show. You name it, they are what makes it possible. So let's jump back one step again, Hayden, because I want to talk. You wrote extensively about Donald Penn in your column in a couple different areas. And one of the ones that I want to touch on, because I mentioned this in one of the columns I did earlier a couple weeks ago when he restructured his contract, was the fact how mature he's acting, how he's taken Colton Miller under his wing. I mean, you go back to the structure of the contract too, which I'll let you fill people in on the numbers. But when you look at what he did, I said back then that this was completely indicative of the culture that Gruden has created, which is it's about team. Yes, you have to make your money. You have to do your individual piece, your contract, your career. Absolutely. Everybody has to look out for themselves when it comes to that. But what Donald Penn did with his contract and what he's been doing in showing his ability or his ability to move to other spots, to work with younger players, shows a level of maturity and selflessness that I think is a really big deal, and you touch on that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I spoke to a few people a couple of years ago when there were a few rumblings about when Kelechi Osemele signed, whether Donald Penn was going to have to move over, because everyone thought with the money, the size of the contract regarding KO, that he was going to be the left tackle. And I spoke to a few people, and every single one that I spoke to, they all said there is no way in hell that Donald Penn is going to move to the right side. It just wasn't going to happen. And then I got a private giggle out of that, because week one of that season, he had to move to the right side when all the starters and the backups went down with injury against the Saints, and he had to play 26 snaps. But hey, he looked good that game. Yeah. But it's a real sign of his maturity. It just, as I pointed out in the podcast, not the podcast, my article, if you look at a quote from Donald Penn that I pointed out, and he says, "We've got a good thing going here. I just want to help us win. I'm not playing too much longer. I just want to win." And that really typifies the point of which Penn is at in his career. He just wants to win. Give me a ring. Mm-hmm. He's like that NBA basketball player that signs on for the vet minimum when they're worth about 5 times as much, because they've only got a year or two left, and they want that elusive ring that they haven't been able to get. And like Tom Cable said earlier this week in an article that I read by Vic Tafer of The Athletic, he was saying that if you want to be champions, you have to make sacrifices and you have to do the little things. And this is one of the little things that, if you get a lot of small marginal gains over a long period of time, you're going to see big things going forward. And this potentially has the ability to make the Raiders' offensive line not just a good one, but an elite one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other issues here too is, you hinted at your column that, people might be writing off Donald Penn even after this year, but with the restructured contract that he's now, he's guaranteed $2.75 million for next year. But in your mind, the way the contract's structured, the money that he's guaranteed, you think it shows that they actually think Donald Penn will be around for a few years?
Well, I think that he'll be around for 2019. After that, 2020, that's anyone's game. I think that's a long time to project, especially when you're dealing with someone who's in the latter part of their career. And I think if Penn had no guaranteed money on his contract next year, there'd be even a chance that he would get cut. But this is a certainly a way that Penn can extend his career by 12 months. That's for sure.
That's right. Okay, so now let's end this because we're gonna cut out here pretty soon. Khalil Mack, right? Nobody's got any more information. There was a report out from a writer from CBS Sports tonight saying that he's gonna hold out into the season, which I still don't buy. Where are you at with Mack and kind of where you think the situation lies as we approach Game 3 of the preseason?
I'm just going to point out that report from that reporter in particular also said at the time that the Las Vegas proposal came out that there was no chance in hell that the Raiders were going to move to Vegas.
That's right. You're right.
I wouldn't put much stock, if anything, into that report. There are a lot of other reports out there that are more credible. Let's just, if we go back to Matt, getting onto the topic of that, I think that he's going to show up eventually. I would be absolutely staggered if it's not week 1. I won't be surprised if he actually rocks up in the next fortnight. It's really going to be a matter of, do the dollars and cents come in? If they don't get a contract done by the time of the regular season starts, I think he's going to still show up for week 1. I don't think he's the type of person that's going to hold out because it's counterproductive. It's not going to get, it's not going to help him. It's not going to get him any more money. It's at that point he's going to be losing money,
right?
And that's going to be detrimental to him. I know he was a first round pick and he's already earned a bit so far. He's earned roughly about 15-20 million over his career so far, but that's peanuts in the grand scheme of things compared to what he's potentially looking at. And I mean, for every week that he misses, he's looking at losing something like 800,000. And I don't know about you, but I'm not passing up 800,000 for anything.
No, we've said consistently here on the podcast, on the website, and on the radio show that he's not going to pass up those game checks. So I agree with you there. At the same time, though, the things that I'm hearing are that it's not close. Okay, so he'll come in, he'll play this season. But if I'm the Raiders, I mean, purely from a business standpoint, I'm not talking about relationships or the dynamics between player and front office and all that stuff. And if people feel good about where things are, but they don't have to hurry. They don't have to hurry. He can play this season and they can tag him and negotiate with him as they go through the season, or tag him at the end of the next season too, going in to prevent him, or I should say, as he goes into his free agent year. So if I'm the Raiders, if I'm going to pay that money, they're talking quarterback money. The reports that we've seen, $20 to $22 million are out there. I just don't see why they would be in a hurry. If the relationship starts to deteriorate significantly, I still don't think he misses time. I don't think he misses game check. You can just go out and play and show what you're worth. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, I think that if they don't get the contract done by the beginning of the season, they very well could shortly after.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, something that people need to be aware of now is that gone are the days of having an elite $20 million quarterback. The elite quarterbacks now, if they are signing a contract today, they are getting between $25 and $30 million per season. So there's no $20 million quarterback that would sign today who's going to be an elite guy. We saw, Case Keenum, for crying out loud, got something like $17 million per year.
Yes.
I mean, look how much Sam Bradford has robbed the NFL owners over his career. He does nothing. He spends half the time sitting in the medical room. What's going to happen, even if you look at the wide receiver market recently, Sammy Watkins, Brandon Cooks, they're all getting paid mega bucks. They're getting paid $15 million plus per season. So the contracts are starting to get to become more reflective of the increases in the salary cap. We're seeing roughly over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen a $10 million increase per year. So we're seeing a lot of contracts catch up to that because what you're finding is that the quarterbacks that are on long-term deals, they stay at that long-term deal that looks good down the track, which allows that extra cash flow to be spent on other positions. And right now, we're just going to see a case where a $20 million elite pass rushing defensive end, that's not going to be such an out of common place in 2 years' time. I think that the Raiders have been at the forefront of innovation and being the first to get things established for a long time in the NFL, and I think that let's just pay the man.
Yeah,
just get it done.
Well,
get him in. You don't want to blow the salary cap. You don't want to ruin it from that perspective. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge that he's your best player. Keep your best player happy, and the locker room's going to be harmonious as a result.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Hayden. I think, too, that they're looking down the line, too, though, as well, is if Amari Cooper accomplishes what everyone thinks he can this year, then you have to start thinking about Amari Cooper. But to me, with all due respect to him, and I love him as a player and the potential he has, defensive ends, the quality of Khalil Mack, he is a generational player. Okay. And so if I had to choose between the two, meaning paying Mack now and perhaps losing Cooper later because the Raiders can't afford him, then I would do that in a heartbeat. So we'll see how that all goes down. Now, we also had some of our listeners who asked for a stadium update. And just a quick update on that before we let you go, Hayden, too, so you can hear it, is they are on schedule. The stadium construction crew continues to work 2 shifts. And when the heat in Las Vegas dials back, they will go to 3 shifts, which is nothing new for construction projects in Las Vegas. Las Vegas right now is in a massive construction boom, including the stadium. So there is projects up and down the Las Vegas Strip and, of course, all around town as well. When you drive by the stadium now, there is, I think, 5 massive cranes out there, and you're starting to see the stadia, so which is basically the concrete poured where you see the seats will go into eventually on the inside of the stadium. And then on the outside, I actually drove by on the way home tonight. The steel is there. There's lots of steel on property, and the steel structure on the outside starting to take shape where you can actually start to see the curvature of the stadium shape at the bottom. It's not real high yet. They're going to go higher as the summer goes on and the fall goes on. But it is all on schedule and very exciting. And to drive by it every day and see the progress they're making. I mean, again, the Local 872, the Laborers, is a sponsor of this show, and got to give them all the credit in the world, along with the Raiders and Mortensen McCarthy, who are building the stadium, just going up great. So we'll keep you updated on that. We're going to have a longer update and perhaps a guest on Sunday's show this week. So that was fortuitous. So make sure you stay tuned. Hayden, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you check out Hayden's column, Any Given Monday, which is always available by usually 6 a.m. Pacific time, West Coast time, yes, on Monday morning. So make sure you check it out. Go read it now. Hayden also does other work for us, too. So make sure you read him throughout and check out silverandblacktoday.com, where we always have updated stuff. We try to do our things, our content online a little bit different because you get a lot of information. There's a lot of great Raiders sites, both news and fan-related, so we try to be a little different. Hayden, thanks, man, and have a great rest of your week.
No, thank you, Scott. Have a great week. Speak to you soon.
Yes, that was Hayden Nadolny, of course, senior NFL writer and columnist for silverandblacktoday.com. And you can hear him here on the podcast every Monday. We will also be doing podcasts throughout. We're going to do more content. Some of you guys, when we do these shorter podcasts, I get comments, which I appreciate because it means you like listening. You say, oh, it was only 30 minutes. It was only 40 minutes. Well, we're doing more because remember, we do 2 hours a week on Sundays. And then we do this 30 to 45 minutes on Mondays, and we will be doing some more mid to late week as well because we want to get into do some game previews as we head to the regular season, so make sure you do that. As always, we appreciate your support. I mean, without the listeners, without the readers, and the website growth continues to amaze me. We started this thing, and we wanted to do it with a slow build, thinking, well, geez, by 2020 we should be in a nice position. We're just way ahead of schedule, and that is all because of you. So thank you, all of you guys out there, Raider Nation, throughout the world. We hear from people all over the country, all over the world, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate that support. Do us a favor. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast, okay? You can subscribe to it on iTunes, Google Play if you're an Android person, Android listener, owner. Also, you can check us out on Spotify. So if you're a Spotify listener, we're there. We're also on YouTube, so the podcast goes directly to YouTube. Yes, there's other things besides videos on YouTube. That's a very popular channel for us as well, so you can listen to us there too. The radio show and the podcast, whatever we do from an audio perspective, goes right into the same feed. So if you subscribe to this, then you get everything. The radio show, the podcast. We're going to be doing halftime shows. We're going to do all kinds of things during the course of the year. You will not miss one if you subscribe. So please do that. Please rate us as well. We always appreciate hearing words. Drop us a line, too, if you ever want to give us a suggestion. Tell us what we did well. Tell us what you didn't think we did well. We're good with that, too. It's all good feedback. You can hit us up at info. That's info@silverandblacktoday.com, or you can drop us a DM on Twitter, silverblack2day, and we respond to those as well. So we appreciate that. We hear from a lot of you guys DM on Twitter, so feel free to do that as well. Again, Sunday mornings, 8 to 10 a.m. on CBS Sports Radio, 11:40 a.m. in Las Vegas. We do that. Also, a shout out to our brothers and sister show over on CBS Sports Radio 1140. And that, of course, is Sports Adrenaline Las Vegas. They bring all of Las Vegas sports. Make sure you go out and check out their last broadcast. Carmen Policy, the former GM president of the San Francisco 49ers, was on, and he talked a lot about the Raiders moving to Las Vegas. He worked for the Raiders and the Chargers to try to get them back to L.A., Just a fantastic interview. So make sure you listen to that. Check out Sports Adrenaline Las Vegas in all those channels as well. Well, that's going to close it out for us, folks. We really appreciate your support on this Monday. We want you to have a good week. We're going to say goodbye now, of course, but never goodbye for good. And as we always say when we end our shows, may the autumn wind always be at your back. We'll talk to you next time, Raider Nation. Thanks for listening.